Hello, all you wonderful readers. Welcome back to Shelf Check, brought to you by the Carolina Manga Library. Today we're going to take a walk through the shelves and talk about She Dies at the End, a set of recommendations about melancholy stories that will hit you right in the feels. As usual, we're going to recommend several graphic novels and tell you why they are amazing. As a reminder, we're only recommending series that are officially available in the US, either digitally or physically. Today's episode is brought to you by our fantastic patrons. Special thanks goes out to our honorary librarian, Sean Vahek, and our library assistants, DB Explorer and Selwyn Hector. Stay until the end of the broadcast to learn more about joining our Patreon. So with all that out of the way, let's get reading. So this month's recommendations aren't all going to be spoilerific. She's literally going to die at the end. But there's a growing trend in manga where the story is just melancholy. You know, it's not fall down on your butt sad, but at the same time, it's not happy either. So these titles are going to be all stories that have some kind of element of sadness as a basic part of their storyline. Spoiler warning, obviously, none of these titles are going to be new, except for maybe one, I think. I may throw that one in. But a spoiler warning is definitely in effect because, yes, the character does, in fact, die at the end of some of these. So hopefully that won't spoil it for any of you guys, but hopefully that you won't get upset about the fact that this is going to be very melancholy. So the first series I want to talk about this month in our wonderful jaunt down the melancholy world is a series called Orange. Now, this is a 3-book series that came out a few years ago, and it's all about time travel. The idea is based around the idea that these kids all, they grew up together, and then as adults, they realized that one of their friends died when they were kids, and that they had the power to write letters to themselves, to their younger selves, to somehow prevent this friend from dying. And it goes through a lot of, dark mental places for these different teenagers, and the problems that they're going through in their high school lives. And the reason I recommend it to people is because every time I thought that I knew what was going to happen to this series, it took a sharp left turn and either got darker, sadder, or somehow even more deep than I thought it was going to get. It's the kind of story that really, really keeps me guessing because you don't know half the time what the kids have written to their past selves. It's not like they just said, hey, listen, your friend, jumps in front of a bus at 2:16 on a March 17th, go stop him. It's more along the lines of, listen to me, you little stupid twit. You're a moron and you have too many feels, and here's an adult trying to help you process your teenage hormonal emotions. And I just want to help you because not only are you going to save your friend, you're going to save yourself. So it's the kind of series that will keep you guessing, and it's the kind of series that you're really going to sob like a 5-year-old as they get through more and more and more revelations of what actually happened to this kid. And you do not know, and I'm not going to tell you, if the letters actually work. You just need to go read it. Just trust me, read it, and then jump on something on social media and tell me what a horrible person I am for making you read this, okay? Orange. Really, really good series. All right, so this next one, this is going to be the one that most of you probably figured I would talk about when you actually saw the title of this month's episode. I'm sure that you thought I was either going to talk about this series or another series. So let me stay your hand here. We are not going to be talking about A Silent Voice this month. A Silent Voice, I think, needs to go into a different episode that I haven't decided which category it's going to fit in yet. But Silent Voice is not going to talk about. We're not going to talk about that this month. Instead, we're going to talk about Your Lie in April, which, yes, obviously came out quite a few years ago and is pretty much at the top of everybody's sadness list, okay? When I read this series, I finished it, I got to the end of the 12th book, and I just lost it, okay? I cried so hard at the end of this book, and I had a friend at the time who was going through a life-changing illness, and I called her crying just to check on her because at the end of this stupid series. So Your Lie in April is the story of a young man who plays piano and has lost all will to play the piano because his mother was an abusive, horrible woman, one of those perfectionists that if her son wasn't playing piano perfectly, he was a waste of her time and a waste of her space. So he got completely burned out and just like hates music now. And one day he meets a girl in a park who is playing a little piano trumpet thing that I've never seen before, and she's playing it for a bunch of kids, and she's so happy, and she's living in the moment, she's living through the music, and it touches his musical soul, and she encourages him to go back and play piano, to accompany her on her violin, and he can play piano with her. So the whole story is about, of course, she is secretly ill, and it's not a spoiler because it's like in book one you find out that she's monstrously ill with something. And the best thing about this story is that it's not about her, that she is not the main character of this story. Yes, what happens to her is the driving plot line of the emotional core of this story, but the plot and the pathos and everything that keeps you reading this story is about the boy and about him rekindling and finding his own love of music and his love of living. That, like, he didn't even know that he wasn't living until he met this girl who lives life to the fullest because she's dying. You know, this is the kind of series that I constantly use this one as an example to teachers and librarians when they ask me, well, what's so great about watching, anime or manga? It's not a story that's going to touch you. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Read this. Please, for the love of God, read this or watch this. Because Your Lie in April is a perfect example of how manga is a medium, not a genre. You know, I would never, ever, ever give this to a kid who's only ever seen Shonen Jump titles, A kid who's only ever watched Dragon Ball or Naruto or Demon Slayer. I would never give this to them because it would emotionally destroy them to read it, and it'd be far too real for them. Honestly, I don't think I'd give this to anybody under the age of maybe 15. Because, raging emotions of teenagers will latch onto this series and make it their entire identity, and they'll be wearing, they'll just be depressed forever. You need to be at least rationally in charge of your emotions to get through Your Lie in April. The anime is also fantastic because they actually play the music for you, and the music that they chose is just perfect, and it brings the whole story to life. And oh my God, why haven't you started reading Your Lie in April yet? If you skipped it, when it was popular because you thought, I don't want to cry, no, trust me, you're going to want to cry through this. Absolutely go read Your Lie in April. It's going to be really interesting to see if I can actually get all the way through this list without needing to take a break and go cry, because every single series I picked is emotionally devastating in a different way, but few of them are as emotionally devastating as To Your Eternity. So, To Your Eternity is a series about a celestial type god being who manifests himself on Earth as different creatures and different people, and he lives different lives to experience how the world works when you are mortal. And every single one of his lives ends poorly. It's so sad over and over and over again, because life is short and sharp like a sword. Okay, I stole that from ElfQuest. If you haven't gone and read ElfQuest, there's my plug. Go read it. So, To Your Eternity, to me, is the epitome of a melancholy fantasy story. That's the kind of story that you want this being to understand humanity. You want him to understand life and what it's like to be mortal, but at the same time, you kind of want him to stop being so upset, because every time he manifests into a new life, he doesn't understand what he's experiencing. He's like a newborn child every single time he reincarnates. And every story is just sad. It's so sad. It's the kind of story that just makes you think about it, and it makes you think about your life, and it makes you think about, what are you doing with your life? What joy do you have in your life, and how can you get more of it, and how can you share that joy with other people? It's the kind of story that every time I read it, I start crying. I've read it through all the way through once. I haven't been able to make it back through it again. Okay? It's just it's so disheartening to watch this being struggle over and over and over again and live all these different lives. And again, not just humans. Okay, he reincarnates as different animals and he gets killed like every single time because circle of life. It's just the lives that he leads are they're so meaningful. He starts to realize that mortals are the way we are because we only have this life. You know, we're passionate and strong and rude because this is the only life that we have. This is the only life that we get. This is the only life that I have to tell you about these magical stories that I've read. This is the only this is the only life that I have where I can run a library that, brings joy to people all over the country. This is my only life. Rise up and live it. That's the entire point of To Live Your Eternity. To Your Eternity. God, it's so good. All right, so I had to have at least one sappy shoujo title in this particular month. So we're going to talk about an older series called A Devil and Her Love Song. And this story is about a girl who went to a private school and she got kicked out of her private school and now she's going to public school. And she's got this reputation for being just like this complete delinquent. Like she got kicked out of her school because she beat somebody up or that she yelled at her teacher or she slept with somebody. It's just this horrible, horrible reputation. And she gets this reputation and she has this reputation and she keeps this reputation alive basically because she doesn't take shit from anybody. She has no filter and she has no patience for fools. So if you're annoying her, she's just going to say, listen to me, you're being annoying, go away. Okay? She's not going to sugarcoat it into some kind of, oh, hey, listen, you're just really, annoying and you need to kind of dial it back because you're kind of bumming me out. No. She will absolutely tell you that you're being a jerk and you just need to stop. Okay? And she's known as a terrible beauty, a devilish beauty in her high school. And of course she makes a couple of friends and she kind of comes out of her shell and they teach her, how to be a little more, socio-normative. But the tragedy of this series and the reason I'm putting it in this particular episode is because it's one of the best examples I've ever read of toxic society. Okay? We all know there is nobody meaner on this planet than American middle school girls. Okay? There's just nobody meaner ever. Okay? Even the high school kids, they're still pretty bad, but middle school kids are the worst. Okay? Middle school kids will latch onto anything and make it your entire identity. Okay? And that's kind of what this story is about. This girl is struggling to find herself in this new school with new friends, and she just wants to be true to herself, and she wants to make friends so badly, and she wants to behave a little more normally, but she just can't stop being who she is just to make everybody else around her happy. And it's really poignant in this series that it's the rest of the class that are the bad guys. They all call her Maria the Devil, but it's not her that's causing any of these problems. It's the bratty school girls that are like, oh no, everyone's gonna think she's prettier than me, so let's make fun of her and ostracize her and get her blamed for all this delinquent stuff, and everyone's just gonna blame her because she's the delinquent. And it's that kind of story over and over and over again. But that in itself is melancholy enough. But then you get into why she left her old school and why she had to come here and why she thinks that she doesn't even deserve to exist. She doesn't need the middle school girls to tell her that she's a useless waste of space. She already thinks that because of what's happened to her in her life. So it's the kind of story that I really hope that you read. It's definitely worth tracking down. I think you can read it on the Viz app. I don't know for sure. I'll have to go look for you. But The Devil and Her Love Song is hands down one of my favorite shoujo of all time. It's one of the first shoujo that I read that was like, oh, this can be something other than, sappy or on high school-esque, flowers everywhere shoujo. This can be this could be something else. Okay, let's read this. Devil and Her Love Song. So I'm going to pivot away from anime and manga here for a second and talk about a DC Comics graphic novel. Now, I'm not going to try to explain the entire plot of what goes on in this story, but Identity Crisis by DC Comics is one of the best portrayals of grief I have ever read. Okay. To put it very, very briefly, the wife of a superhero is murdered. Okay, she dies very suddenly, and they know that she's been murdered because she called for help as she was, being murdered. And the entire story is about them trying to figure out who killed the wife of this superhero. But it really brings to light the idea that the reason superheroes wear masks is not to protect their identity, it's to protect the other people in their lives. There's this great scene halfway through the book where they're questioning one of the villains, and he's psychotic, and it's great. And he looks at the Flash, and he says, "You know, is that a wedding ring I see underneath your suit there? There's definitely a bulge on that finger. What's your wife's name? Where does she work?" And that just honestly just sends chills down your spine when you think about it. What would you do? How do you protect your family and protect your loved ones when you are a costumed superhero? I'd never really found that in any other story about superheroes. Mostly they're all about the action, but Identity Crisis is the rare one where it's not about the action and beating people up. It's about how do you protect the people you love? Who benefits from, knowing and hurting your family? What kind of monster could do that? You know? And the best part of the story that makes me cry, even honestly now tearing up a little bit, the funeral of this wife. The funeral comes along, and this is a woman who, she was an honorary member of the Justice League. Okay? Not even Lois Lane was an honorary member of the Justice League. Only this wife was, because she'd been there since like the beginning. Okay? So when she dies, the entire superhero community shows up. Okay? And I mean, her funeral is freaking huge. And everybody is just devastated because this was like their sister, their mother, their aunt. This is the woman that would bake cookies for people's birthdays. Okay? And the part that gets me every single time is her husband gets up to do her eulogy, to say a few words about his wife. And he's sitting up there and he's trying not to fall apart. And the panels flash to a couple people that know him. And Hawkman, like, it's just like Superman looks at him and says, "You can do it." And Hawkman looks at him and says, "Be strong." And it goes back to the hero, and he's the elongated man, so he's like got rubber powers, and he literally melts on stage. He cannot hold himself into his physical form. He's so upset. He physically cannot hold himself together. And the way it's drawn and the way that people react in the audience to the way he falls apart, it's just horrible. If you've ever lost a loved one and you've been to the funeral and you see the one person who loved that person who is gone more than anybody else, and you see them crumple, it's worse when the person that crumples is the one that is normally the one who will come up and be happy for you, that will bring you flowers on your bad day, that will call you and ask how your day was, the one ray of sunshine person. And to see that person fall apart because they lost the only person who ever understood them, I've never seen it done better. I'm never gonna see it done better. I don't care what anybody says. Give me a million examples, I'll read all of them, but none of them will beat the absolute tragedy of the Identity Crisis from DC Comics. So, of course, I have to pick one really, really sad historical story to talk about. And today I'm going to talk about In This Corner of the World, which is an autobiographical story about a woman who lived on the outskirts of Hiroshima during World War II. Yes, you see where this is going. I'm not going to obviously tell you what happens because we all know what happens. But this is one of those stories that brings to light what happened to the regular people who live during these traumatic, horrible times. And some of us can relate to that right now. Of course, nowhere near to the same scale yet, but we understand what it's like to go through a political upheaval, and we understand parts of what this woman went through, seeing her family torn apart, seeing her loved ones go off to war and not come back, and seeing the destruction of her entire reality, from something that she can't even comprehend. It's so huge. So this story goes through her life before the war, during the war, after the bombing, and then at the end of the war. So it's the kind of story that's going to make you think. It's the kind of story that's going to make you cry. There's a fantastic anime adaptation of it. In This Corner of the World is one of the ones that I recommend to high school students who are studying World War II and want to get a perspective of the other side of the war, because that's not a side that gets taught very often. So definitely go check out In This Corner of the World. Just make sure you have a box of tissues with you, because you see how Grave of the Fireflies made you cry? Oh, honey, this is worse. I promise. So my last story for this month, actually, I just read a few weeks ago. Thanks to our wonderful patrons, we were able to buy a whole bunch of new books over the last couple of months, and I was able to read the first volumes of a whole bunch of new series. And one of them that I read was called Hereditary Triangle. This is a single standalone manga that tells the story of a man and his wife who moved back to their small town for their childhood, where they met and went to school and fell in love, to help out with a member of his family. And they go through the process of processing trauma from their young adulthood. So basically, they had this friend who was basically their third. Okay, this friend was in love with the girl. Both guys were in love with the girl. The girl was in love with one of the guys and was not in love with the other one. And she made her choice very early, and so she and the boy started dating, and they eventually get married. And this other boy, who was literally their best friend, just kind of up and vanishes one day. He just gets up and leaves. And they keep in touch a little bit through college. They write letters and such. But then they find out that their friend died, somewhere between when they got married and now when they've moved back to this small town. And the husband is walking down the street the first day that he gets there, and the neighbor's door opens up, and out walks his friend, looking just like he was when he last saw him when they were in high school. And he's just completely flabbergasted, doesn't know what to do with himself. And it turns out that it's their friend's son, who has moved back home to go to college. And this husband and wife kind of process what they went through, losing this friend who was such a big part of their lives, kind of vicariously through this younger boy, through this college kid. And it's the kind of story that has absolutely no magic in it, has no big twists and no big turns, and there's nothing icky about it. They don't try to, like rekindle any kind of friendship or anything with this kid. It's more just like they're finally able to think about, the what happened when they lost this friendship and what that meant for them and what it means to each other and what it means to their marriage. So Hereditary Triangle, I went into it knowing absolutely nothing, and I wish that I could read it again for the first time. I wish that I could experience the emotions that I felt, because if you've ever lost touch with a friend, or you've lost a friend and you're sitting there one day and you're scrolling through your phone and you see something that reminds you immediately of that friend, and that split second where your brain thinks, oh, I need to send this to so-and-so, and then you remember immediately that that friend is no longer there for whatever reason, that's this entire book. Okay, the entire book is like that. The entire book is that feeling over and over and over again for these two adults. And it's just fascinating to be able to read a story like this, because I've never read one quite like it. And I kind of want to process some of my own loss now after reading it. So Hereditary Triangle, give it a try. Okay, welcome to the announcements and the Q&A portion. Everybody okay? Did you make it through the recommendations all right? Do you need a minute? Do you need to pause this and go get some tissues or eat a piece of chocolate? Because I would completely understand it if you do. But I'm going to plug on right ahead because I'm a professional. So, a couple of announcements for you. Like I mentioned when I was talking about one of the books earlier, we have a whole pile of new books that we ordered in February thanks to our wonderful patrons. We were able to pivot our Patreon to be entirely used to buy new books for the library. So the money that we make every month will go to buying new books, brand new books, things that aren't, old or that I find at a Books A Million or something like that. These will be new release books that we're going to get at least the first volumes of so that you guys have the opportunity when you come visit us to read some of the cutting edge books before they become, super uber mega popular. Imagine if you got to read Demon Slayer before the hype hit. It's that kind of thing. So if you're interested in helping out with that, please consider joining our Patreon. I'll talk more about it later on in the outro, but of course our patrons get ad-free access to our podcast a day early, and you get behind the scenes stuff like bloopers and transcripts and stuff, and you also get to vote on what I buy, and you also get a first-hand look at what's going on behind the scenes of the library. So speaking of the library, coming up, we don't have any events in April. This is kind of our slow time where we can kind of reset before the summer gauntlet begins. But that summer gauntlet begins in May. We will be back at Anime Central in Chicago. This is my favorite convention that we do. I have been attending Anime Central since 1999. It was my first convention ever. Funny thing, going back into some past here, it was the convention where I met Fred Gallagher, the author of Mega Tokyo, which was like the first big webcomic American thing to get a book version from Tokyo Pop. It was like a big deal. I also met Crispin Freeman there for the first time, the voice of pretty much everybody from the 90s and early 2000s. He was in like everything. You could play the 7 degrees of Crispin Freeman like he used to play the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So that'll be in mid-May, and then immediately the weekend after that, we're going to be at MomoCon in Atlanta. We've been to MomoCon numerous times. We're so excited to be back and see all of you wonderful Atlantean people. So here's our Q&A for the day. What do I do if I have extra books lying around? Well, obviously you can give them to me. We take donations of used manga and comics every single day. Our mailman absolutely hates us. He hates me especially this week because he delivered 5 huge boxes of books. And you can check out those and what was in them in our on our social media. So if you are interested in donating books to the Manga Library, pack them up and either mail them to us. Our address is on our website, www.carolinamangalibrary.com, or you can bring them to an event that we're going to be at. Feel free to just show up and show us what we're going to be. Just show up where we're going to be and just give me a box of books. And most likely you will get a special gift to say thank you, usually a special ribbon. So please consider donating your extra books to our shelves. Clean off your shelves and add them to ours. Thank you so much for joining us on this month's episode of Shelf Check, brought to you by the Carolina Manga Library. This episode was written and recorded by the Carolina Manga Library and edited by NoodleBoyMedia. You can find information about NoodleBoyMedia on all social networking sites. We'll return next month with Cozy Apocalypse. Stories that are set in the post-apocalyptic world but are somehow still uplifting and cozy. Yeah, that's right. We're going to talk about the Frering kind of people. Remember, if you're interested in supporting the library, consider becoming a patron. Our patrons get access to the podcast a day early, as well as behind-the-scenes fun like bloopers, transcripts, and votes. We're also on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Discord, Twitter, and Facebook. If you can find links to all this on our website, www.carolinamangalibrary.com. So until next month, we'll see you all in the stacks.